March 2006, United States District Court, Brooklyn. Burt Kaplan walks slowly to the witness stand. 71 years old, frail, half-blind, one eye staring out from behind oversized glasses. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. For 3 days, he testified about 2 corrupt NYPD detectives who'd murdered 8 people on mob orders, about confidential informants whose names were sold for $4,000 per month, about Israel Greenwald, a diamond dealer whose skeletal remains had just been discovered in a Brooklyn garage after 20 years, Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa, the Mafia cops, sat at the defense table. Both retired detectives, both decorated officers, both accused of being contract killers. The jury listened to Burt Kaplan describe how he'd acted as the middleman, how he'd passed police intelligence from the cops, the Anthony Gaspipe Casso, on the boss of the Lucchese family, how he delivered $70,000 in cash for a single murder. Kaplan spoke softly, Brooklyn accent thick as concrete, unemotional, matter of fact. "How's your health?" the prosecutor asked. "So-so," Kaplan replied. He mentioned prostate cancer, temporal arteritis that threatened his vision, Raynaud's disease, high blood pressure, a detached retina, 2 minor strokes. But his memory was perfect. He named dates, locations, dollar amounts, the detectives who sold police secrets, the mobsters who bought them, the bodies that resulted. This is the story of Burt Kaplan, the old man of the Jewish Mafia, the garment dealer and marijuana trafficker who never fired a gun, who wasn't even eligible for Mafia membership because he was Jewish, but who spent 40 years as a Lucchese family associate and destroyed more criminal careers than any hitman ever could. His testimony convicted the Mafia cops. His cooperation exposed corrupt NYPD detectives. His information led to dozens of indictments across multiple crime families. And he walked free after serving just 9 years of a 27-year sentence. The Bensonhurst Kid, 1933, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Burt Kaplan was born to a lower-middle-class Jewish family. Shy kid, bespectacled, brainy. Not the type you'd expect to become a mob associate. But to the Italian mobsters who ran Brooklyn, Kaplan had value. He was smart, reliable, discreet, and Jewish, which meant he fit the mold of Meyer Lansky, the prototypical Jewish gangster who'd made millions working with Italian organized crime. By his 20s, Kaplan was committing fraud. Small schemes at first, testing the waters. 1967, he was convicted on federal fraud charges, granted probation. It should have been a warning, a sign to go legitimate. Instead, Kaplan doubled down. 1973, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for theft. He served his time at Allenwood Camp, a minimum security federal facility, and that's where everything changed. At Allenwood, Kaplan met real mobsters. Anthony DeLappy, a maid member of the Lucchese family, whose murder Kaplan would later facilitate. Frankie Jr. Santora, loosely associated with the Gambino family, who became Kaplan's best friend. And Santora had a cousin in the NYPD, Louis Eppolito. When Kaplan got out in the mid-1970s, he had connections he'd never had before. Prison had been his graduate school in organized crime.
The garment dealer, 1975. Kaplan entered the garment business. "I got in through it by accident," he later testified. "A friend from prison returned to the streets. Kaplan took him shopping for leisure suits. The suits were so cheap, almost stolen goods cheap, that Kaplan bought some and resold them at a Connecticut store for profit. One thing led to another. Kaplan rented a storefront in Brooklyn, built racks, sold 3,000 leisure suits in a single weekend. "My clothing business was 100% legitimate," Kaplan said, except for the counterfeiting on the side. His business prospered, moved from Brooklyn to warehouses on Staten Island, eventually supplied Macy's and Kmart. Kaplan became successful, wealthy. He threw elaborate events, including his daughter Deborah's wedding in 1985. The guest list bridged his two worlds. Christopher Christie Tick Funari, consigliere of the Lucchese family, Anthony Casso and Victor Little Vic Amuso, who later became the Lucchese boss, friends from Allenwood, lawyers, garment executives. Kaplan had the photos to prove it. Shown in court years later, they documented his connections to organized crime's hierarchy. His daughter, Deborah, attended Vassar College, became a lawyer, started at a high-paying firm, then joined legal aid in 1986. In 2002, while his father was serving a 27-year sentence for drug smuggling, Deborah Kaplan was elected a criminal court judge in Manhattan. In 2017, she was appointed administrative judge. Kaplan had built the perfect double life: legitimate businessman, family man, and Lucchese family associate who worked directly for Anthony Casso, one of the most violent underbosses in Mafia history. The hair products scheme. Early 1980s, Kaplan got involved in a scheme to sell hair products. The chemist assured him they could also manufacture Quaaludes illegally in the same facility. The plan failed. Kaplan was arrested and tried. The chemist testified against him. He was convicted, back to prison. But prison kept connecting Kaplan to the right people. He built relationships, made himself valuable, proved he could keep his mouth shut. When he got out, Anthony Casso, now rising through the Lucchese family ranks, took notice. Kaplan was reliable, discreet, smart. Casso made him a trusted associate, someone who can handle sensitive matters, someone who could be a middleman between the family and outsiders, including corrupt cops. The cops. 1986. Kaplan needed a favor. Israel Greenwald, a collaborator in one of Kaplan's criminal schemes, was about to become a government informant. Kaplan couldn't let that happen. He reached out to his old prison friend, Frank Santora. Santora's cousin Louis Eppolito was an NYPD detective. Maybe he could help. Eppolito and his partner, Stephen Caracappa, met with Kaplan. They discussed the problem. The detectives offered a solution. "We'll find Greenwald, tell him to pull over, kill him, make it disappear." They did exactly that. Used flashing lights to pull Greenwald over, shot him, buried his body in a garage. His remains wouldn't be found for 20 years. Kaplan paid them. Eppolito and Caracappa had proven themselves, and Anthony Casso was very interested. Casso put the cops on a monthly retainer, $4,000. In exchange, they provided confidential police information, names of informants, details of ongoing investigations, intelligence about who was cooperating with law enforcement. Kaplan became the courier. He met with Eppolito and Caracappa regularly, passed them cash, received police intelligence, delivered it to Casso. And when Casso needed someone killed, the cops handled it. 8 murders over 7 years, $70,000 for a single hit. The arrangement worked perfectly until 1993, when Casso and Lucchese boss Vic Amuso were arrested. Federal prosecutors came after the entire Lucchese hierarchy. Kaplan went into hiding. He fled for about 2 years, only returned after learning that Casso, who'd become a government witness in 1994, couldn't testify because prosecutors found him unreliable. Kaplan thought he was safe. The marijuana ring. While running his garment business and working with Casso, Kaplan had another operation, a $10 million marijuana smuggling ring. He coordinated shipments, distributed product, moved millions through a sophisticated network. 1996, federal agents arrested Kaplan in connection with the marijuana operation. 27-year sentence, effectively life in prison for a man in his 60s. DEA agents approached him, FBI agents, NYPD detectives investigating the corrupt cops. They all wanted him to cooperate, to testify about Ippolito and Caracappa, to provide information about Casso and the Lucchese family. He refused. For 8 years, he kept his mouth shut. Even though he wasn't Italian, even though he could never be a made man, even though the mob wasn't protecting his family or paying his legal bills, he stayed loyal. But in 2004, Kaplan was 71 years old. He'd served 8 years of his 27-year sentence. He'd never see his granddaughter grow up. He made a deal. The testimony. 2006, the Mafia cops trial. Kaplan took the stand. 3 days of testimony. He described everything. How he'd met Ippolito through Frank Santora, how the cops killed Israel Greenwald in 1986, how Casso put them on retainer, how Kaplan passed $4,000 monthly, sometimes in brown paper bags, sometimes in envelopes, how the cops provided names of confidential informants, Anthony DeLippi, whose location in California the cops discovered through his parole officer, Bruno Facciola, who the cops identified as a likely government cooperator based on an indictment. Both were murdered shortly after. How in May 1990, the cops warned Casso that he and Victor Amuso were about to be arrested. Casso fled. Amuso was captured. The cops' information had been accurate. How the cops committed or assisted in 8 murders total. Not for justice, for money. Kaplan testified that Ippolito once said he liked doing business with Kaplan and Casso because people got taken care of that deserved it. The jury heard it all. The cash payments, the murders, the corruption that had lasted from 1986 to 1993. April 6, 2006, Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa were convicted on all counts: racketeering, murder, kidnapping, conspiracy. Sentenced to life in prison. Ippolito died in prison in 2019. Caracappa died in 2017. And Kaplan's sentence was reduced to 9 years for his cooperation. He was released in 2006.
The aftermath. Burt Kaplan's testimony didn't just convict 2 corrupt cops. It exposed systemic corruption in the NYPD. It revealed how organized crime had infiltrated law enforcement at the highest levels. It led to the discovery of Israel Greenwald's remains after 20 years. It helped prosecutors understand how the Lucchese family had operated during the 1980s and 90s. Kaplan also provided information that led to additional prosecutions. When Ippolito and Caracappa gave Casso intelligence about informants in the Bonanno and Genovese families, Casso forwarded that information to those families. More murders resulted. Kaplan knew the details. He'd been the middleman for all of it. In 2010, New York City paid $9.9 million to a man who'd spent 19 years in prison after Ippolito and Caracappa framed him for the murder of a prostitute. The Mafia cops' corruption had destroyed innocent lives. Kaplan died in July 2009, age 75, prostate cancer. He'd been living in witness protection. He never held a gun, never committed murder, never even qualified for Mafia membership. But his testimony destroyed the careers of 2 NYPD detectives, exposed corruption that had lasted nearly a decade, helped prosecutors understand organized crime's infiltration of law enforcement. All because a 71-year-old garment dealer with one good eye decided that 8 years in prison was enough.